So one of the models that I teach when it comes to creating a book, launching it, using it to really build your business and brand is what I call the big idea framework, or the author to entrepreneur pathway. And it's really simple. It's ignite, develop, execute, and accelerate. Idea, big idea, right? And so in this stage, we're going to talk about how do you ignite, and what does that mean? Well, each of these have a parallel path. Each of the steps, ignite, develop, execute, and accelerate, you can look at on the top path, it's all about your big idea. It's about your message. It's about the actual topic, the content of your book, the products, the experiences, the services you offer as an entrepreneur, and the way that you're positioned, how people perceive you and experience you from a branding perspective. The parallel track with each of these is the relationship side, and how, in this stage, you ignite a relationship with your readers, with your customers, and ultimately with your longer term or higher end clients. And so what's at work here as we look at each of these stages, and this will be a recurring framework that I'll share with you over the course of the weekend, is that we're at once looking at the personal side of teasing out, oh, here she is. Come on in, Marisa Murgatroyd. Good. Okay, see you soon. And so there's the parallel track, right? On the one side, it's about developing all that becomes your book, your business, your brand. And on the other side, it's about developing and nurturing the relationships with your readers who become your customers and clients, and in many cases, friends, right? So as we look through these, on the first side, right, it's about igniting this relationship with your readers, is about finding a point of invitation, finding a promise, or identifying a promise that you can make to them through your book. Really identifying something specific or something even somewhat intangible that your readers will realize, or how their perspective will change as a result of reading your book, or how they'll be inspired, or how they'll be moved to overcome an obstacle. These things are what we're going to call your point of invitation, which is really just the point at which somebody discovers your book or discovers you online, wherever it is that they meet you, perhaps at a live event, right? That point of invitation is what you are proactively offering to the marketplace. With your book, we're going to dive into how this appears in your title and subtitle and how you can position it as such. But in the general sense, with the relationship, it's about where you meet somebody on your beginning of your pathway together. So if somebody discovers your book and reads it, then that's the first step on the journey. If you meet somebody at an event, you have a great conversation over lunch, and then that turns into a partnership or a collaboration point, you'll trace it back to that point in time when you first had the impression, you first had the introduction. And so that's why we call it the point of invitation, is because it's something you can proactively put out into the market, not only through your book, but a lot of what I consider marketing is me just speaking to different invitations and putting it out to as wide of an audience as possible. Some examples of that are talking about how to come up with a good-looking book cover, how to self-publish your book, how to do interior layout, just on the author topics, how to position and set up for a book launch. All of these things are specific invitations that somebody may be looking for at that moment in time when they come across me or when they come across you, and that invitation and the quality of it can determine whether people continue learning from you, experiencing your work, and developing that relationship that can turn into a multifaceted, profitable, friendship-based business partnership. So this is really about how your book and how the whole approach that we're taking goes from your book out into the world. We're going to look at it from the perspective of a book, because here we are at Bestseller Summit Live. So we'll use a book-centric approach, but a lot of these principles are applicable to all aspects of business. right? So it's this invitation. So let's look at a few examples. The invitation of lifestyle entrepreneur is live your dreams, ignite your passions, and run your business from anywhere in the world. Is that a juicy invitation? Yes. Maybe, if you're working a corporate job, or if you wanted to travel more, if you've thought about starting a business, and you're out there looking around and you stumble across this, then maybe that's the invitation where you're like, yes. And I say, oops, we'll get to that, I guess. Jumping ahead of myself. But here's a hint. It's the subtitle. Let's look at another example. The Struggle is Real. These are all books that I've published that we'll use for examples. Their invitation, finally break the dieting cycle, transform your mind and body, and evolve into the person you've always wanted to be. Juicy invitation? Yes or no? Yeah. So each of them lost over 100 pounds without pills or surgeries, and their book is proposing this value to the market. This is the point of invitation where people discover Carol and Robbie. Hint, it's the subtitle of their book. Dan Monroe, who is, wow, he left the room right when I put his book on the screen. And my girlfriend's gone. Just kidding. Well, Dan's going to miss it. And clearly I'm missing something too. But here's the example nonetheless. Build the motivation and confidence to create an authentic lifestyle. Keywords there being motivation and confidence to create an authentic lifestyle. Once again, it's the subtitle. Starting to see a recurring pattern here? Mind Lift. You'll get to meet Casper this weekend, a very, very inspiring author. Mental Fitness for the Modern Mind. Once again, it's the subtitle. So these point of invitation, what are we learning about the invitation? Hint? Yes, it is. So when I think of a book, and when I think of how I respond as a reader of other books, that point of invitation, it's not necessarily the title itself. Oh, look, Dan came back just in time. There he is. Just wanted to put that back up since you came in. Cheers. Dan's first book, his second book, Nothing to Lose. We just got the print copies. But the point here being that the subtitle is, in fact, how you're proposing value to your reader. It's your invitation to them to pick up the book and open it. It's your invitation to them if they're looking for information, knowledge, a solution, a way to solve a problem, a way to achieve a goal. That's what gets bundled into the subtitle, which is one and the same as your point of invitation as it relates to a book. You guys with me? Too much for after lunch? Do we need to dance around again and refill the coffee? No? Good. But you with me here, right? So this is actually marketing and book related all in one and the same. Hello. So what's your invitation? And if you were to share your invitation, would somebody RSVP? Would the invitation be received? And what is RSVP? Respondez s'il vous plaît? Respondez s'il vous plaît. Did I say it right? We have a French speaker in the room. We got two. I don't speak French. But the point being that is your invitation landing? That's the important point here, right? So before it winds up being the subtitle of your book, you have the option this weekend, you have the option with other people in this room, you have the option beyond this weekend as well, to woodshed on what is that point of invitation? Where are you going to meet your target audience, your ideal readers, ultimately your ideal customers and clients? And here's something that's important about that, is that where you meet them is not the entirety of what you can do together or where you'll help lead them. There's a difference here, and I think this is where a lot of people get caught up in marketing in general, and especially people more in, let's say, the spiritual realm, right? Almost circumventing this part of the process where you get clear on who you're speaking to, and in terms of a book, who your book is for, right? There is a reason that there's something called BSL categories, which are the different categories that you can say your book belongs in this category. At some point, it no longer works to say, oh, this book's for everybody. This book's for everybody. Anybody could learn from this book. You ever caught yourselves thinking along these lines of doing something so generally applicable that it has value to everybody? Well, I believe that everybody in here does have value that could be applicable to everybody, but what we want to do is meet your readers, meet your market, meet your eventual customers and clients at a specific point of invitation where you are best qualified to help them, and that you're speaking to either a desire they have or a problem that they want to solve. And in fiction, that could be, wanting to read a good story or being invested in a storyline, plotline. The things we're talking about here are not just applicable to nonfiction books or to business or personal development books. This is all around, right? And so Marketing 101 for authors is part of it with the design of the book itself and the title, but even more importantly is the subtitle, because embedded within that is the invitation that you're making to your readers. You with me? Yeah. So the question becomes, did they RSVP, right? One of the things I loved doing when I was on my book tour, very first ever in Malaysia when my book came out, so I just sort of stand to the side and you can observe somebody randomly picking it up and perusing it. As we get into more marketing and tactile aspects of launching your book and so forth, there's many, many other ways to know, is your invitation landing? Is your marketing message landing? And how do you test that and refine it? That ultimately becomes a big part of marketing and what you hear about like optimization. That's just refining your message, refining the way that you are putting yourself out there so that you best meet your ideal readers, customers, and clients. And what's the reason that clients don't take action, right? Or a reader is interested but then doesn't buy your book, or buys your book and then is interested in a product or service that you have or doing work with you and ultimately doesn't. One of the authors I've worked with has a very useful tool for addressing this. Brian Wetton has a book called Yes, Yes, Hell No. And what that means is saying your voice of intuition may be a total yes, right? When you see an opportunity, when you see a book, when you hear an idea, your intuition may be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Or I intuitively know that that's the right thing to do. Or I intuitively know that I want that. Right? Your voice of reason could say yes. Well, logically, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, strategically, that seems like the thing that I should be doing. But then the voice of fear comes up, and it's like, oh, hell no. Oh, no, we're not doing that. Right? And whether that's saying, I intuitively know I've got a book inside of me, and logically it makes sense because, as Jesse's saying, if I have a book, I can really build my business and brand, but oh, hell no. I'm not going to put myself out there like that. Or whatever it is that comes up that the voice of fear is speaking to you. So Brian, in his book, and I've come to believe it, believes that basically these are three distinct voices, right? And you can know that you're on the right track when your intuition is a yes, when logically and rationally you're like, yes, and then something comes up that makes you say, oh, hell no. That's how you know you're on the right track. And that's how you know exactly what you should be doing and the direction you should be going. Because we want to see the fear and acknowledge it, and then take action anyways. See that? It's not about overcoming fear. It's not about finding a way to minimize fear. It's about seeing it, checking in to make sure your intuition and reason are still a go, and then saying, all right, let's do it. With me? So this will come up for your clients just as it comes up for you, just as it comes up for me, just as it comes up for anybody else that you may learn from or work with. So be aware of it, because whatever you're feeling and experiencing, your readers, your clients, and your mentors and the people that have helped you are probably feeling some variation of the same thing. So we're not alone, right? We don't exist in a vacuum. So where do your clients get stuck? Where do your readers get stuck? And who do you have to become to best serve them? That's $1 million distinction. Because it's one thing to get really clear on where your clients get stuck or where your potential readers are going to get a lot of value. And then it's another to say, well, who do I have to be in order to best serve them? Quickly, I will share my thoughts on content frameworks and on structuring your book and on how to really envision the outline of your book, the content, the primary content of your book. So there's a couple ways that I like to look at content frameworks. And these are both just tools, examples. You can take them or not. So the first one is an acronym. And we have in your workbooks a content framework exercise, which we're not going to do right now, but this is something that I've put together so you have some detailed notes on what I'm going to share here. So one approach is to take an acronym. And in The 4-Hour Workweek, one of my favorite books, he said, here's a new deal. And DEAL was a framework that stood for definition, elimination, automation, and liberation, right? So within the content framework, the primary content of the book was structured within these 4 main sections. And the first one, it goes through defining, eliminating things out of your life, automating things, and ultimately liberating yourself. Teaching how to start a location-independent business, right? Another example from my book. One of the content frameworks in there is called the Vision Map framework, right? So with an acronym, if you go that route, you want to use a word or use a set of letters that's also representative of what people will learn from your book or learn from that framework, right? So with Vision Map, it's sort of a cute play on words, but it stands for vision, mission, action, product. So there's a section of the book where it explains the framework, the Vision Map framework. Then it explains how your mission, the action plan that you put in place, and the end product that materializes flows from that vision, right? So just as a content framework, Vision Map is within this sort of acronym. Now, another type of approach you can take to content frameworks is what I call a multi-step process. You've probably seen many of these. So one example here by Rosetta Thurman, who had Launch Your Business, the subtitle is the 5-step solution to do what you love, have the freedom to travel, and live life on your own terms. The keywords here are the 5-step solution, right? And so those 5 steps, get focused, get clarity, get paid, get online, and get out there, become the content structure within which her actual stories, strategies, techniques, etc. fall within. What does this do? At the high level, it lets somebody quickly wrap their mind around what they're going to learn before they even dive into the content itself. So think of a book as almost like a multi-stage rocket that has to fire in sync before somebody's really diving in and is pages or chapters deep in your book not wanting to put it down, right? The first thing that's got to fire is that visual, the book cover itself, right? The title needs to jump out. The invitation or the subtitle needs to be clear enough where you're at least interested. And then if you open it, and if you're like me and you flip to the table of contents, if I saw, a framework that said new deal, and then it said, defining, elimination, etc., I can wrap my head around that more than chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I see Vision Map, and I see there's vision, mission, action, product, it already foreshadows some of what you're going to learn just by looking at the content framework. Similarly, with a multi-step process, the 5-step solution to fill in the blank could be almost anything, right? But your mind knows and therefore satisfies that part of our mind that wants a little bit of predictability, a little bit of certainty, knowing what you're getting into before you dive too deep. I want to talk briefly about what I call the spectrum of author styles. Right? So with the content framework, or with a clear view on how the content of your book could be structured at a high level, you also want to keep in mind what kind of an author you identify as. And I see this as a spectrum that goes from what I call an artisanal author to an executive author, and it's a spectrum. So an artisanal author is somebody who, like myself, when I was writing Lifestyle Entrepreneur, literally wanted to create the entire book, the illustrations, the layout. I learned InDesign, which is a program to do book layout, just so I could set the book up exactly how I wanted. I hired designers, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very personally involved process. And for some people, you may identify with that, wanting to be really deep in the writing, the creation, the layout, the illustration process that's involved with your book. The other style, authoritative. Wait. No. But I bet she's got a good book in her. But the other style on the other end of the spectrum is executive author. So if we look at the other end of the extreme, let's say it's somebody who already has a business, who's busy, has demands on their time, recognizes the value of having a book, and sees the utility in having a book, may not see how it's possible to hide away for 6 months and write a book, but that's an author's style that also exists, and there's a way to create a book without holding yourself away for 6 months to do so. Ever see when it's election season now, every candidate's got a book, right? Where do these books come from? Ghostwriters, developmental writers, other people that are involved in putting together books for busy executives, for politicians, for other people. The point being that there's, the point being, I hit the wrong thing on my clicker. So let's go back over here. The point being that there is a way to create content, book-worthy content, whether or not you're personally writing every word and laying out every aspect of the book, or whether you're taking a more hands-off executive approach. And if you are, I'm going to share a quick tip on how you can speed up the content creation process. But really, this is more of a mental construct to just help you identify with where you fall, knowing that there's no right or wrong. Some people really like going down the rabbit hole, doing all the illustrations, doing the layout, being very particular in how their book is set up. And others may be more hands-off and say, look, I want to get it done. I know that done's better than perfect. I want to get it out because I've got a marketing plan and a launch for some other aspect of their business taking place that the book will support. So if you are more on that executive style, then here's a quick tip on how you can create 2,000 to 3,000 words of content a day in under 30 minutes. And it's quite simply this, author interviews. Meaning either a self-interview or teaming up with a friend and having them throw 2 or 3 softball questions to you on a topic that you're going to cover. So if you're looking at your outline, if you have your content framework in place, then just getting on with another author, hitting record, and expounding on the topic that you have expertise on. And the trick in doing this is to have it narrowly defined enough where you already know what to say. It's just about setting you loose and pointing you in the right direction. Because I think where people get caught up, especially with a book, is if you sit down and you look at a blank sheet of paper and you're like, oh my gosh, where do I start? Right? So if we can get a content framework, and then within that, you can see how the chapters, how the actual outline would fall. And then for each of those chapters, you say, well, what are the 2 or 3 main points I want to get across on this topic? Now you've got the basis to do a mini author interview. Now you could do this by yourself, but the times when I've tried it myself, turning on a recorder and just starting to talk, it doesn't flow. So I found even with an audience of 1, even if somebody's asking me the question, like I created a whole manuscript on how to create and launch a book, So if one of these interviews is just him saying, hey, what are the important things people need to know about book covers? Well, then I would talk for 15, 20 minutes, and when I'm done, I realized I was done. I said, okay, I covered all that information, and now we get that transcribed, and now that 15, 20, 25 minutes of speaking becomes 2,000 to 3,000 words of text content. And if you've got a good content framework, if you are clear on the outline or the structure for your book, and if you're clear on what you want to convey on each of the main points in your book, then this is an option to rapidly turn that into text content without actually going through the more arduous process of writing it all out. Again, there's a spectrum of styles. I've been on both sides. They're both useful. They both work. But one way to circumvent anything that may feel like a limitation in the writing process itself is to just do a recording and get it transcribed and then look at it. Because a lot of times what will happen is you'll see it written down, and you'll immediately know how it should be, right? So even if the first pass isn't 100% pure gold, that's fine. But once it's transcribed, now you're actually working with a piece of content instead of looking at a blank page. Is this helpful? This is like a tactic. And we're going to talk about how to find, hire, and manage people to do all sorts of things, including transcription, including developmental writing, including editing, including cover design tomorrow. But for now, just understand as a concept that you can hire people online to do just about anything at very affordable prices and with very high levels of service and expertise that can be provided. And we will go into more on hiring and managing talent online tomorrow. It is sort of like being the conductor of an orchestra instead of a musician yourself, which actually speaks to a skill set that will help you grow your business. So whether or not you're an artisanal author or a more executive style author, at some point to scale, you need to have systems. And we're going to have a wonderful talk from Ms. Gisborne tomorrow on that exciting topic. But you can practice even in the creation and launch process of your book by hiring and managing people, specialists online. And we're going to talk about that more soon.